one of my favorite panels, but of course, because storytelling is deep at its heart. And so these are case studies of transmedia stories that have actually launched or are about to launch. And it's moderated by one of my all-time favorite people in all of this industry, and that's Gale. So pay attention, get questions ready, because these guys have the answers, and have fun. Thanks. Gale.
Thank you, Suzanne. So just a little background on me. I've been at MTV for 17 years, and that's a long, long time in this industry. And in fact, I started running their feature film division. So we made the movies, Jackass and Beavis and Butthead, Varsity Blues, Election, Save the Last Dance, and a whole bunch of others. And, so I've been very steeped in, obviously, sort of traditional narrative filmmaking for movie theaters. And I love it. I still am so moved and driven by stories on the big screen. And, really have discovered over the last 6 years after I left the film division and launched a new media division and then what we're calling a cross-media division, how you can really translate the skills and the sort of the sort of emotional effect of good stories in ways that we hadn't really anticipated and never really experienced before. Of course, there's been television around for a long, long time, but really we're now entering into an era where it's all kinds of ways to sort of engage people and get them to be invested in your characters and your stories. And so this panel is going to be a little bit of what's happening in that space. And, we at my division at MTVX have done things with filmmakers like Craig Brewer and Lynn Shelton, who did a movie last year called Your Sister's Sister and Hump Day, and then Craig, who did he did something for us called $5 Cover. He had done Hustle and Flow, and really allowing these people to sort of open up their storytelling abilities and talents has resulted in some pretty cool stuff. We're still at a very early stage. I mean, the big issue always comes down to how do you make money with that? We know how to make movies in movies. We know how to make money in television, and so each of these panelists has a different approach to that, and I think they're all really, really different. In fact, after I talked to some I know really well, Carrie over here worked with me at MTV Films, but so what we'll do is we'll go down the list. Two of them I think have video to show, and so that will just be sort of both in terms of getting your thinking going and also sort of as an introduction to who they are and what they do. So if we'll talk for a while. I'll gauge how quickly to ask the audience for questions. So if you're dying to ask a question at that moment and you think it's a good time, raise your hand. I don't think it has to be that formal. So if these guys don't mind. So why don't we start with Juan, and he can talk about himself and present a little video.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. This is a great panel. So I'll tell you a little bit about where I come from. I come from public media. I have been producing and developing new series for public media, public television for a while. I am now the director of development and program development and production for KCET, which split from PBS a year and a half ago. And we've been going through a very huge, big transition in trying to figure out what our role as public media entities is going to be in this sort of post-PBS world that we live in right now, and for us. We became the largest independent television station or public media station in the United States. When that happened, then, a lot of things sort of change. Our funding sources change, our membership change, our content strategy changed. And one of the things that we really wanted to figure out was to, first, how to engage again hyper-locally with our community, which is Southern California, 11 counties in Southern California, and how to engage with them both through, our broadcast and also through our online and social media spaces, which are completely different audiences. And we have come up with different sort of pilots and different ideas, a series that I've talked about here, Departures, which is a very hyper-local look at the social history of Southern California and LA. But this project and this series that I'm going to present to you guys today is something that we launched in May. So it's brand new, and it's doing really great. And the basic concept of this was how to explore the arts and culture of Southern California. We have 11 counties. Normally, when you have the online space, we have a lot of writers, feature writers, journalists that work with us to, write stories about different things. And what we did was engage around 40 or 50 writers across Southern California, all the way from Imperial County, Mexicali, Tijuana, San Diego, to San Luis Obispo, Inyo, Bakersfield, and engage them in telling us the stories, the cultural stories that are going on in their areas. Publish them either weekly or bi-weekly on Artbound. I don't know if you can put maybe, well, it's the video. It's okay. Publish them on our site, and then allow the users to vote for the stories that they like the most. And these stories are later on turned into short format documentaries that later migrate to the broadcast. So we're really tapping into the online space and the broadcast space, and we're allowing the audience to become sort of participants in basically curating the programming that is going on in our air. And at the same time, sort of the framework and the storytelling framework that we have built around Artbound with all these writers and the voting mechanism, has really has a built-in sort of marketing and promotion sort of system in itself, because these writers work for, either the San Diego Tribune or the LA Times or the Santa Barbara Independent, and they really activate their local communities as well. And it's really working. We thought that this hyper-local model that is not sort of drive-by journalism, but it's really engaged with the communities that are responding to these stories, was going to take some time to take off, but it's really working. We have had our second episode, TV episode, based on the stories that have been voted and produced online. And what I'm going to show you guys right now is the broadcast component, which is basically the writer that wrote this article introducing the story, and then the actual production of the story.
I'm an artist and a writer here in Los Angeles. I discovered the steam egg because Michael Parker invited me to see his grad show at USC, where he was a student, and the steam egg was a part of that installation. It was a space where people would come together in the middle of his installation and steam in the gallery. Later, he took the steam egg to his studio and started to have events just around the egg. I received an email from him to come on down for one night. He had programmed an evening with Herb Jays and a DJ. The Herb Jay was a person who was going to fill the night air with scents, and the DJ was going to fill the night's air with sound. And I was captivated right away. As a writer, I'm really interested in focusing on small things that people are doing to influence the everyday life. And it's really exciting to be presenting it on a platform like Artbound, where my writing is viewed first online, and then it gets bigger, and the reception of it gets bigger and magnified through the lens of creating videos and broadcast. It was really great to see how the video makers transformed it into their own thing. And I really, really liked the sound collage that they did. It just kind of bubbles up in a way that feels really effervescent. And whenever I go to the Steam Egg now, I'm always going to think about that soundtrack.
I'm interested in space and the ways that people interact in space. And behind us is a sculpture that I made that I call the Steam Egg. It is a steam room in the shape of an egg with 2,000 mirrors over it. I initially made it thinking that it was an experiment in looking at ideas of utopia and failed utopias. And I made this sculpture that I intended to be a steam room that was entered through a hole in the bottom. But I really didn't think it was going to be used. So I built this sculpture.
But you wanted it to be used.
I guess I wanted it to be used.
Yeah. You know, in the context of a gallery, you're in this sort of white cube. I think people were a little uncomfortable in that context, taking off their clothes. But then as soon as we got it in our studio, it totally took on a life of its own. So for the last 2 years, we've hosted STEAM seasons in our studio. Michael invited an Herb Day and a STEAM Day to come and invite people to STEAM.
We want it to be a place where people can come and sweat and communally heal.
The Steam Egg is definitely community building. It's something that brings people into the intimacy of a home, and you get to meet people in a different way outside of more normalized social contexts, and it's truly unique.
Anyway, so here you have the writers. So there are 40, 50 writers that write across Southern California, and you know the stories get voted online, and those stories are translated into video, and later migrate to broadcast. So we're sort of allowing the audience to become our programmers in a way. Anyway.
All right, we'll go next to Steve.
My name is Steve Woolf. Also very happy to be here with you guys. My background is as a producer. I actually created one of the early web series hits, a show called Epic Foo, which started in 2006, ran until about 2011, early 2011. We did about 85 million views, and it was really watched around the world. And what was remarkable about that show, I think, relative to this panel, you know, maybe even more relevant than what we're currently doing, is that it was really one of the first entertainment properties to be based around building a community around the show, about making them participants in the show. We did over 2 dozen projects with our audience. Probably the crown jewel was something called Phonetics, which was like a satire of Dianetics, where we were asking our audience to hunt down clues hidden within the video. There was kind of a narrative ARG embedded into the hosted show that we were doing, and they had to look at certain frames of the video even and find clues to find a URL, where they were then tasked to do things like make a video with your pledge to Phonetics and all these things. And we made it extremely difficult to find after, you know, learning it a few times, falling down. And about 100 people wound up submitting videos and going through the whole process of leveling up to level 7 Phonetics. And it was a lot of fun. It was a few years ago. So now I work for Blip. I've been at Blip for almost 3 years now. And I run the content team, and I run the studio that we just launched over the summer. And what we're a platform for original web series creators to distribute, monetize, build audience, and basically manage their video assets as well. And what we've been doing lately is kind of working more closely with creators, signing them to deals, exclusive deals. We've been non-exclusive for most of Blip's life. Starting to produce some of our own shows as well, some on the branded side, some purely original. And very much with an eye towards, you know, what this will ultimately be. I mean, I think, and one of the reasons I'm super excited to be on this panel is because I think we probably all realize that making short TV shows and putting them online is really not the future of this thing. There's a whole language and a vocabulary around the medium that is really only evolving now. We're in the very, very early stages of figuring out how to do this and adapting the tools we have to make it work, to make the audience real participants in this media. And I think that's what we're heading towards. So at Blip, you know, we have a technology team, we have a platform, we have our own player, we have an ad sales team, you know, including ad sales internationally. So we're able to help these creators grow their shows and also work with them more closely to say, how can we make this bigger? How can we make this better? How can we make it a franchise? What tools should we be building to let the next generation of storytellers do their thing and grow an audience in a new way with the vocabulary that'll be native to the web?
Excellent. All right, we're going to move on to Alex.
Thanks, David, for monitoring this, and thanks for having me here. And my name's Alex LeMay. I am the CEO, executive producer, and founder of the Shadow Gang. We are a entertainment studio that works in the transmedia space, and we create both original content as well as help TV studios, motion picture studios, gaming studios, and major publishers solve sort of that jump into the content universe and the idea that a single entity of, a push mechanism, simply a book isn't enough. It's that we help them in building a universe of media where the book, the TV show, the game, and all of that are pieces of a larger universe. And we do that through proprietary technology, much like the idea that platforms are going to start to take over in terms of solutions for immersing audiences into large world narratives. So we are, due to a media embargo I'm not allowed to say, but we're launching a platform tomorrow that I think answers a lot of these questions. We are best known for a pretty large-scale transmedia experience called Go Berserk that was in conjunction with science fiction writer Michael Grant. And that was done across 17 different countries and is leading to a major motion picture. It encompassed everything from comic books to online gaming to iOS games, Android games, all the way across the whole ecosystem of media. And essentially, our job is, whether it's our media or whether it's somebody else's content, is to help create, socialize, and monetize that media in a more seamless way than maybe transmedia used to be. I think that many people have been popped in the mouth by the mighty ARG. And it's a great environment when it's done well, and it's expensive and cumbersome when it's not done well. There are so many great things that came out of the ARG community and the ARG world that I think we're all learning, everybody at this table and beyond, that we're all learning and that we're taking those learnings. And as you said, it's just starting. The conversation is just beginning, and I think it's going to be an interesting 18 to 24 months in this industry, and we're going to see a lot of really, really amazing platforms and a lot of really amazing content coming out.
Carrie? Oh.
I'm sorry. An alternate reality game. So essentially it is a puzzle or kind of online conspiracy that is too large for one person to solve, so it really drives community and forces people to work together to solve a common problem.
Carrie?
I'm the senior manager of the New Frontier Story Lab at the Sundance Institute. This program was developed last year, was our inaugural year. It builds on 30 years of the Sundance Institute lab models, which previously and continuously actually support directors, writers, theater, film music, documentary filmmakers. And the development of this lab was brought about because Sundance felt that they needed a place to support people working on projects that were interactive, immersive, multi-platform, sort of under that heading of transmedia. They didn't have to be related to film at all. They could be film-based, web-based, game-based, theater-based, music-based. It can really come from any different medium, any different facet. But the idea being that we could bring together a group of people, and we select 6 projects throughout the year to come to the lab, and we choose 12 advisors to come and spend a week up at the resort thinking through the creative development of those projects. So I have a short piece to show you, an identity piece we created about the lab last year.
One day there'll be like voice recognition technology, and we just say play, and it all's perfect. Well, while we're waiting for that, I will just say, what's interesting, I guess it was Thomas, Suzanne, whoever put this panel together. I don't know if you knew what you were doing you probably did. But what was interesting in hearing sort of like the different stories of these individuals' jobs or the businesses that they're doing, it sort of went down this progression. So it started with really old media that happens to be sort of very community-based from the beginning. So, we're talking about sort of public television. So it's interesting how it's been around for 50 years, and really nothing changed, but at its core it's always been about the community. So now you've got these tools to use that actually have taken what could have been almost an anachronistic business and turned it into something that's actually kind of much more relevant today than it's ever been. And then we go down to sort of the this new platform, this sort of new network, the new the new players in town, Blip, which is actually kind of providing thousands and thousands of individual storytellers to tell their stories, and in a very democratic way. And you guys are sort of changing a little bit how you're doing that because you're being a little more selective, but so you're not YouTube. You are really sort of a place where, in theory, sort of a little higher quality is being sort of developed and encouraged. And then I think what we got to with Alex is like this completely new thing altogether. It has nothing to do with anything we've ever seen before, except that stories are at the core. But when it comes to sort of the use of a platform and technology that you're talking about, which you're not allowed to tell us about, but somehow, it's going to be, how do you tell stories? Like, that's almost like a vague term at this point, stories. And Carrie is like running this group that sort of takes them all and puts them together. So you've got the oldest media, theater with the new technology, and it's sort of like been a very interesting thing that, in fact, even in order of how this is all sort of shaping our ways of doing things. So I feel pretty excited about how we're going to continue this conversation, because it's kind of like a little mix of this and a little new of that, and put it all together with really intelligent people to sort of actually find tools that we don't even really quite know what they are yet. And Carrie's job to sort of like have people like yourselves be able to participate in doing that, because it's challenging. Each of us have been severely challenged by it. So that to me is now the theme. So you guys have sort of laid it out. Now we're ready to watch Carrie's piece.
Is changing, and it's changing quickly in terms of technology, the convergence of technology and storytelling. And Sundance is an organization that needs to be ahead, and we felt that there were some really exciting artists and really exciting projects that were defining the future of storytelling, and we felt like we had a unique contribution to make to that.
A lot of film and television and games all came of age in the 20th century. So what's really great about the New Frontier Storytelling Lab is kind of looking at the world that we live in and saying, okay, how can stories become more 21st century?
In this interactive space, we haven't figured out what the godfather of this new medium is. We don't know what the classics will be. In the same way that early cinema didn't see close-ups and reaction shots and colors and scored music, we still don't know even quite what the language is to tell the stories. We just sort of are learning what the tools are and how to use them.
They're all trying to use both sort of traditional narrative and all these innovative forms of storytelling. But like any narrative, it all comes back to the same problem, which is, what's the core of the story you're trying to tell, and what's the meaning of the story you're trying to tell?
Most people doing this kind of work do it in isolation, and they don't actually know of other people doing the work, and they don't understand the metaphors and the tricks and the tropes that other people have come up with. And so by building a community like this, especially really early in a process of development, it allows artists who are trying to figure the space out to figure it out together. And that amplifies the power that everybody has to create something interesting and to experiment successfully.
Connor and I have the comic book series, and we've started development on the film and the stage play. But for us, is to kind of just expand our horizons in terms of storytelling. Things such as the game space or the interactive space that we just don't have that much experience at, and that's what we've been learning a lot about in the last 3 or 4 days. And it's really sparked a bunch of conversations, allowing us to explore different options for Kill Shakespeare.
There's so many projects now in the space, and a lot of it is kind of novel still, like, hey, cool, we can do this, but at the same time, like, to get it to be like a story that people will remember and mean something to them emotionally, that's tough.
One of the things I love about this adoption of transmedia by master storytellers, whether they're writers or they're visual artists, even performers, is that you get to bring the discipline and the work that they've done in cultivating that skill set and collaborate with an audience.
We're trying to blur the boundaries between fiction and nonfiction. It's cinema. It's all storytelling. So there are great conversations about the nature of truth and representation that cut across fiction and nonfiction in really exciting ways.
What an incredible learning experience to bring a group of people together who really represented different forms of storytelling, represented technology, represented design.
What's going to happen and evolve moving forward is going to be incredibly exciting as the web totally shifts, as technology places things more in people's hands and connects them in ways that were never possible before. But I think the glue of all that is story.
Sundance is a place for any kind of creator to be able to be very personal in their expression, but be nurtured by a group of extraordinarily talented and generous filmmakers. And so the best of what their work can be comes out. I love that piece. That so encapsulates what we're talking about here, and it's been interesting over the 6 years or so that I've been coming here is how articulate we are getting at being inarticulate. I think that on some level we're able to sort of express the things we're dealing with better, but we're still constantly saying how complicated and difficult it is, and we're still learning. So. Kind of with that, I kind of wanted to go down the table here and ask each of you, where do you think we're at the moment in terms of what we just discussed, in terms of the storytelling? What do you think are the things that sort of are crystallizing and becoming sort of just integral to the way the world is now, versus where do you think sort of the challenges are coming from, and what do you see happening immediately next?
I think that the way that I see it, this idea of time-based linear narrative as the end of it all is not working anymore. And I think that more and more people are sort of trying to understand how that framework, where different elements of a story and different elements of media exists, and that framework sort of becoming what the story is in itself. In Artbound, I think that really the framework where all these writers live, all these videos live, all the community participation lives, and all the comments, that's what really creates sort of the final story that we're trying to tell about Southern California. And these individual nuggets of content are just part of a larger ecology. So it's really, the framework for me is what is becoming the new storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, it's the answer to what we see starting to work now, I guess, and some things evolving now is a pretty complicated one. There's all these pieces, a chessboard moving forward, where some pieces are moving sideways or diagonally or dead ahead. And like this panel is really probably concerned with things that are probably 12 or 18 months or 24 months ahead of what the mainstream is thinking about. I mean, we are starting to see some mainstream interest and adoption of a new form of storytelling. I think I disagree a little bit in that I think linear storytelling will always have a place. And, you know, in many ways, linear storytelling that originates on the web will probably find a big audience when we have the ability to distribute to televisions better than we do now, which television distribution is not great on a lot of these set-top boxes. But that audience will come along and discover original web series that are told in a linear fashion, I think probably pretty successfully. But, you know, then we'll see this continuing evolution of the technology that allows people to be a part of the story and, you know, really to choose whether they want to be a lean-back kind of viewer or whether they want to dive in. I mean, I think that's one of the most interesting, compelling parts is that we're starting to see creators think along 3 tracks. And one is like, how do I serve my lean-back audience? How do I serve my casual engagers? And how do I serve my hardcore fans? And those hardcore fans are super important because that's what drives success. They become your marketing team, your evangelizing team. And a successful project probably speaks to all 3 of those types of people. A successful project probably works across multiple platforms. So it's good on an iPad, it's good on a phone. You can get it on a TV somehow. You can watch it on the web. So I really think like the part that's still emerging and we're starting to get real traction on though now is the economics of new storytelling. You know, being able to successfully make this a profitable industry is still challenging. You know, everyone kind of has their challenges from the biggest media companies to public television to startups like Blip. But we're starting to see brands in particular start to really have a deeper understanding of what this medium means and what's actually good for their message in front of viewers. I think mostly gone are the days of like 10-minute commercials where a brand says, make us some branded entertainment, and yeah, do your interactive thing, just work it into the story. I think they're much more concerned about having it work effectively and not be off-putting to the viewer. So that's something I think that is really promising for the next 12 months or so.
By the way, I'm going to be doing a think tank this afternoon about this issue of the sort of conflict between advertising and content, so that as we get more and more into a world where everybody wants things for free, therefore advertising becomes the economic foundation of everything. How do you do that in a way that sort of gives freedom to the creators, yet tells that message effectively? I think there's a slice of it that's perfect and works really well as it is, but then the vast majority of it feels still like a big disconnect. And so that's kind of what we're going to be debating and talking about later. Alex?
So, you know, I couldn't agree more. I think that we're in a situation where there is this struggle between, there are pieces of what we do that are very linear, that are that lean back. And then there are pieces of it that are blurring the lines between reality and fiction. And there's sometimes it appears as if it's happening right outside your window. And I think that we too have to be very aware of what we call the skimmers, the dippers, and the divers, right? Those people who go right along the surface and kind of just snack on things and keep tabs with the world. They have a totally different need than that person who might go in and start maybe being a real freak on the iOS game, or the divers who are spending, we have a whole community in Berserk that is spending, to this day, we launched it last July, to this day, 14 to 17 hours a day on this thing. It's scary. And it's like, we need to say we don't encourage it, but right on. These are the people who evangelize for us. So we have to give them sneak peeks into things. We have to give them kind of exclusive access to things. We have to treat them in a different way. And I think that the internet doesn't like straight up linear, straight lines. It loves 3 dimensions. And there's this whole new concept of radical openness. It's an exponential environment we're creating in. When we took 30 steps, 20 years ago, we got to 30. When we take 30 steps now, we're at 1 billion, if that makes sense. We're exponentially capitalizing on everything. Technology is too new for us to say it's codified. We're getting a lot of really serious data over the last 10 years of transmedia that allows it to say, okay, this is at least allows us to hedge our bets and we can create media in this space. But the thing I will say that we're very confident in is that the audiences are there, and if you build for that audience, rather than trying to suck them to you, go to them. They're there and they're willing to look at your stuff. The problem is that there's also, the internet is the world's largest choose-your-own-adventure game. And there's 15 other experiences. So you either get them, and I think what this says across this line is that narrative is the key to everything. Great storytelling is the absolute must to how one needs to put at the center of this. We're looking, I think, at the reinvention of what studios used to be like in the 50s and 60s. They're putting creatives at the center. They're putting people who are huge fans of stories in the middle, rather than the guy who got his economics degree from Harvard, who, frankly, it's just the wrong guy for the job. Now, the business of this is very, very important. So this has to be money-making, otherwise it's just fancy. And so we have to, what I'm loving about it, and I'll keep this shorter than I am, what I'm loving about it is that we get to dive into the financial models of this. We get to dive into the creative portion of this. We get to dive into the strategy portion of this. And then out of that nexus comes these brand new thought processes and these brand new tools that we get to create. So it's a really exciting time. I think that at the end of the day, story's going to win out every time, and our process through Berserk proved that. So.
Yeah, I guess sort of to follow that, I think for me, and just knowing the work that I look at, I think one of the challenges is sort of thinking past the novelty of it all. I see a lot of that at the moment, and people working to create something meaningful, and also learning to collaborate across a multitude of disciplines to create something, the whole is greater than the parts, essentially, because I think right now there are a lot of people, to borrow from our own video, but there are a lot of people who are doing this in sort of isolated moments that need to, great storytellers need to learn something from people who understand game mechanics, back to sort of the people who engage in all these different levels, thinking through what does it mean when an audience even clicks on something, right? And what is the exchange for that in terms of storytelling, in terms of the work that they have to do? And I think I also see a lot of people really needing to think about how they're engaging with their audience, not just what are they creating for them, but who are they? In a way that I feel like people have, there's been an expectation previous, probably not in games, but I'd say in more traditional media that will create it and they'll show up, they'll arrive. And I think that's really a really big challenge right now, is really pushing people and pushing creators to think through what is going to be meaningful about the story you're telling, in whatever way that you're telling it, that people are going to want to participate on any multitude of levels.
I'm teaching a class right now in sort of digital transmedia, entrepreneurship, storytelling, whatever you might want to call it. And I've noticed they're MFA students, but the job that I gave them was to sort of come up with a new media, new digital idea. And it was surprising to me how this generation, which is native to all of these things, how hard it is for them to even start this process. Carrie was there, Suzanne was there. What we're learning is what we're discovering is, how do you even start to teach this stuff? How do you even begin? Because as Carrie just said, you need to understand game mechanics, or you might need to understand sort of the economics of it. I always kind of think about, the platforms, the technology, the underlying, business model, and then what's the behavior? How do you even anticipate how people are going to react to this stuff? So I'm curious, if you were to kind of teach a class, and you were to try to say, because a lot of people probably in this room are like, this is really confusing to me. I do one thing. I tell stories, or I'm a producer, or I'm a director, or I'm good at technology. But to be able to figure out, if you were telling somebody how to do this, do you tell them to specialize in one of those things, or do you tell them they have to learn a lot of it?
There's a new series that we're starting at KCET, which is very different from entertainment and the commercial sort of discussion that we've had, that I think answers that question really well. We're going to be looking, I don't know who has been or is aware of the Los Angeles River, but there has been a master plan to sort of revitalize the LA River for a while, and now they're looking at a planning of what would a riverfront between Los Feliz and Chinatown would look like. And that's a problem. You know, that's a question that you can pose yourself and you can pose to your students. What would a riverfront look like? And then if you start to really dig into how to find out the answers of what that would look like, you would have to go and talk to homeowners. You would have to look at the history of the area. You would have to do some grassroots sort of organizing to try to understand what people would want out of that river, what are the economics and the demographics in the area, and all of a sudden you have an ecology of of different needs that need to all come together to sort of tell this story of what a riverfront would be. And in a way, I would almost, to a student, would pose a question in that way, because when you have something that you need to find a solution for, the solution is 10-pronged, and that can give people access to understanding what transmedia is, I think.
Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question for any creator is like, why does anyone care about what I'm doing? If you can't come up with a good reason, you probably need to start again. I mean, there's people to collaborate with for technology. There's platforms out there. There's things you can do and test out. But really what's at the heart of it has to be, why are people watching? Why do they care at all? I mean, it could be I'm solving a problem in my community, and that's a very good reason to watch and participate. But if you're a couple of web series guys and you want to make a show about actors in Hollywood, well, there's 1,000 web series like that no one's really going to care about. But if you say to me, I'm making a conspiracy show, it's about the JFK conspiracy and the audience as a participant, I'll get excited about that because you're tapping into, number one, an existing passionate audience on the web, your conspiracy files, especially JFK, and then you're figuring out how to do that thing that makes the audience a participant and makes them part of the story. And then you really have something. The rest of that stuff starts falling into place. You just have to start thinking of the mechanics. You look at some of the stuff that's worked maybe previously. You start drafting your story. And what I always urge people to think about is don't think of yourself as a writer as much as a story architect. Your story has to live in multiple worlds, on multiple platforms, speak to maybe multiple audiences, and do different things for different participants. So if anything, I would say number one thought is like, why does anyone even care about my story? And then number two would be, how do we really make the audience a part of this? Why will they care?
And which ones are, what do you call it? Skimmers, dippers, and divers, right?
Right.
We should work at the same company. It's about making something important. Don't make it if it's not important. And I truly, if you want to, that's great. But if we want to succeed at this and tell multi-platform stories and distribute them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I mean, that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about making an entertainment experience that lasts for months and that goes 24/7 and never sort of stops. And so we look at it as, and this is a common sort of trope in describing transmedia, think of it as an amusement park. If we go to Coney Island, you and I are all going to go through one of 4 entrances, right? And you might go right, you might go left, and I might go to the Cyclone, you might blow up the balloon on the clown's head with a squirt gun, right? We might do that. We'll get spit out the gift shop, guaranteed. And we'll have taken that route and told ourselves that story of Coney Island in a completely unique and individual way, but Coney Island thought of the structure around it. Coney Island said, this is the language you're going to use for this. This is the language you're going to have and be able to speak to each other in a common language, but with totally different paths. And I think what we have to pay attention is how people find our media, where they go after, do they complete it, all of those kind of analytical environments, we have to pay attention. They're telling us every day what they want to do. And we have to be really, really open to listening to those ideas. Because a lot of the times, they go in the face of your business model. Our audience is smarter than we are. There's nobody smarter in a transmedia environment than 19-year-old kid who grew up in a world without the, who never saw a world without the internet. So we pay attention to them, and we have to work very hard to keep up with them because they solve everything. And so it's really about creating that conversation and giving them places to talk about it, commune, conspire. I think that idea of conspiracy plays so well in transmedia. Letting them in on the joke, letting them in on the conspiracy, and hooking them, and creating the amusement park, the universe for them to wander in. And I think Star Wars is a perfect example. 120 books, a gajillion cartoons on TV, games, movies, and they're all pieces in a much larger frame than what we can create as just a simple sort of linear narrative.
Carrie?
Well, I think your question is a sort of a trick one, David, because here's the problem, and I think it's one that we all face, right, is if you're teaching this specifically, one of the points that was made was that, to be sort of a master storyteller takes a lot of hard work and understanding craft, right? And then you add on to that a real need to even have some basic understanding of design thinking or game mechanics and what that means, to involve all of that. And then for me personally, and I think we talked about this, while we were there in your class, is the people who we use, back to your point, right? The only way you can really understand how your audience is going to consume or even begin to understand is to be using those things yourself. It makes me crazy when people tell me about how social media gets used who don't use social media, right? I mean, it kind of blows my mind. It's, I don't want to watch this, or I'm not interested in this interaction. Well, do you actually watch content online? Because if not, then I don't really buy into what you're talking about. And I think that's a real challenge, is that there are so many different pieces to this. If you don't play games, if you don't go online, if you don't watch movies and you don't watch TV, then how can you speak intelligently about how to create something collectively speaking? So I think, I know that maybe the age of the students specifically means that they should be immersed in this, but I think making them really think long and hard about how and why they use and play is really important.
Well, thank God, I think there'll still be traditional movies and television that a lot of people can still make and produce and get involved in, because this is really a big challenge. And I don't know, have any of you seen this show in New York called Sleep No More? Anybody? So if you can get tickets, you should go check it out, because it really will blow your mind when it comes to how do you engage in the most old-fashioned form of entertainment, theater. How do you engage people in a way that, to some of your points, like helps you choose your path, and take on the characters and experience it in the way you want to, and sort of be able to do it thousands of times, and it's always going to be different. Yet at the same time, there's a real design to it all. This didn't happen haphazardly. It wasn't just throwing people in a room. And it's like this brilliant example of where people's thinking is going. And we're having a hard time articulating it, I think, in some ways, because it's never really been done before. And that's kind of the big challenge. And I kind of want to, we'll just keep going down the path here. But do we have to?
Do they have questions?
Questions? Okay. I'm going to ask one question of each of them, and then we'll ask questions of you. You guys ask questions. Like, I just used the word blow my mind. Okay. What's kind of blowing your mind right now that you feel like, whether it's a technology or a thing you saw, Sleep No More blew my mind? It took me a minute after I finished it. I'm like, oh my God, that changes everything. What anything, Juan, do you have
let me think about it.
Think about it.
Well, I can tell you I'm going to be very interested to see what kind of platform you're rolling out tomorrow. Because, at Blip, we've been talking, getting to know the folks at Fourth Wall. I don't know if you guys have seen Rides.tv, but that's a pretty interesting new platform they've built for interactive storytelling that basically lets you tell a narrative story, and at the same time, you can receive a text message that has a piece of the story, you can get an email that has a piece of the story, or even a phone call. And in many ways, in fact, the CEO was sitting up here, he had to run to something, and he's a really fascinating guy. He comes from the ARG world. What's really interesting is that it seems so obvious to do that no one's really done it yet, and this is the first platform that has something like this. And it's really so rudimentary when you think about it. But like, initially going through the experience of that Rides experience kind of blew my mind, because I'm so interested in this idea of immersive entertainment. So I'd have to pick that.
So the thing that's blew my mind recently is it's based in storytelling, and it's a bunch of Dutch filmmakers that made this crazy kind of documentary using motion capture and things, and they did some really serious filmmaking on it, called Human Bird Wings. And it was basically a Dutch guy, just a dude, trying to figure out how to fly. And so he would go out into the park with this Da Vinci-esque flying machine. And the filmmaking was so brilliant, and the way they communed around it and the way people gathered to it really blew my mind. The other thing that is interesting to me is Company P in Sweden. They're doing like these really 10, 20-minute transmedia campaigns. I mean, you hop on and you're off before you know it, but you had a ball for that 15, 20 minutes. So they made it small. Everybody's so busy making everything giant. What if we go the other direction? Let's make it. It's called, the second one is a Company P. They do a bunch of these little experiences. They're little micro transmedia experiences. And so I like this idea of bringing things into a smaller environment, because I think that can be very powerful.
Carrie?
Well, I wouldn't say there's something that's blown my mind recently, although I went to Sleep No More, and it's pretty amazing in terms of experiential entertainment. There are a couple things that I love that I like to talk about a lot. One of them was a piece done by out of the NFB by a duo called The Goggles. They had an interactive documentary called Welcome to Pine Point, and this was done a little while ago, but to me it was really exciting in the way it sort of marries more traditional filmmaking with what can be possible online. And I thought it was also a very moving experience, which prior to seeing that, now this is almost a year and a half ago, maybe more, I hadn't had that type of experience before, where I had felt literally moved by something that I'd been watching, an experience that was designed specifically to be viewed online. The other thing that I'm excited about is this young CalArts grad named Young Jake, who has this piece online called Embedded, which basically takes over a YouTube framework, and it employs storytelling on multiple levels, from the performance of the music video itself to the browser tricks utilized. It's kind of done in a very just graduated from art school, figuring things out as we go along fashion, but to me that's really inspiring. People sort of out there figuring it out, coming up with something creative and new and exciting that's not just, again, novelty-based, but has actual meaning and creates something that I think was really sort of humorous and
yeah, you guys should check it out, because it's like, if you want to know what the kids are doing, it's kind of like, okay, here's a kid who's just graduating, and he's come to this world with an entirely new paradigm. And so watching it happen so well done, is really inspiring. Did you think of something, Juan?
Yeah, I did, and I guess mine is a little less experimental in a way. For me, it has been fascinating to see in the last year and a half, how just normal folks are sort of changing the rules of journalism, and taking really simple tools and really simple delivery mechanisms, and really holding the world hostage into what we need to be looking at. And that for me is remarkable, because this is really giving the simple tools for folks to control the message, and I think that's really important.
All right, well, I know we're past the time, but Suzanne, you said we could go over a little bit to ask questions. That's what I mean. So, any questions? Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. First of all, I absolutely love where things are heading. As a storyteller, I can't imagine a more exciting time. But I have a body of work, and recently, and for years I was a producer just as my day job, and recently it was one of those moments, I can just start producing my own content, and yes, you can get it out there, and which is exciting and great, except I didn't come out here to work by myself, even though I technically could. I want to team up with people, and I don't pretend to be that brilliant at always thinking about the monetizing aspect of it, which is important, extremely, if I want to eat. So there's just been so many companies I've been seeing lately in different business models, and it seems like there's so many opportunities for content generators to partner up with people, and I'm just a little confused about, as an artist, which one still gives me the opportunity to take advantage of now I get to be important in this scenario. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't have someone telling me it's a little more artist-led, like you were saying. What types of companies would you recommend to me might be best?
I know one. Yeah, I mean, I guess of the folks up here, Blip is a platform where you can actually go and sign up. And if you're creating a show and it's fantastic, you can submit a clip. And my team will actually look at everything that comes in through that form and make a determination, is this part of what we want to have on our platform? And if not, why? You'll get an answer back. And I think, what's really great for us is it allows us to discover folks who would otherwise have a problem breaking through. I mean, we see shows come in that are really unique and special, and we have the ability to give them some editorial love, some marketing love, some audience development love. And if it really picks up and finds an audience, then we'll have a more serious conversation about what could we do more closely together. What other opportunities are there for distribution for you, and all of those things. So from my point of view, Blip is a great platform for independent creators. I mean, as a creator myself, I've been on Blip. We've been around since 2005. So, we're a little long in the tooth to be considered a startup. But it's also not the world of YouTube where, you're basically up with literally every video ever made, right? And you may have a relationship or someone in your show who can, tweet it for you or Facebook it for you and help you build audience. But otherwise, you're kind of on your own. And I think that's the thing that's changed about Blip in the last year, is we also used to be like that. Here are our tools. Use them if you want. See you later, right? But we're now moving towards, let's help people discover this stuff, because discovery is the biggest challenge we have in this industry.
Mm-hmm. And Maker is another one that's been talked about a lot, which is a really place where they're giving creators opportunities to use the tools and the expertise that they have, and I'm sure more and more are coming to the fore. Yes.
I'm glad you mentioned Company P, because I was exposed to a project there several years ago called The Truth About Marika. And that's where I wrestled with the concept of creating something that works in the transmedia world for those who want to participate, but will also work in the passive world for those who just want to watch it. So how important is it to be compatible with those two worlds?
I think that's massive. I think it's massive to have that sliding scale of engagement. Again, choice is the word at the key, at the center of the internet. We get to choose whatever we want to choose. And if we start dictating rigid structures, and we don't start making technologies that come out of specific story problems, because a story problem and a distribution problem with narrative and things like that is much different than, say, your average diabetes website or, seriously, they have different issues. Narrative has very specific issues that need solving, and the internet just threw in more monkeys in the wrench and the whole thing, and it got all confused, and people started playing in the technology world, and the technology became more important than the story and all of that. And the fact is at the end of the day, we have to give them the choice to sit back or lean forward, and that's where we're at. And you have to give them every variation in between. So I think to ask that question is a smart one, and I think it's very essential.
Just to add to that, you don't know where you'll find your audience always. It may not be where you think it is. You may find that you crafted this interactive story, but because you used a platform like Blip or another one, you got onto Roku, and all of a sudden you're picking up steam on Roku, and you've got 10,000 subscribers on Roku who just absolutely love this show. Well, that can't be an interactive experience. It has to be the lean-back version. But if you design it right, the lean-back version will drive them to the interactive piece, and then all of a sudden you have these people moving around, and you get to them to experience the full thing that you built.
Yeah, it's a really important question. Carrie, because you've been working in these labs and you've seen lots and lots of projects, that maybe you have a thought about this space in particular.
Well, I was just listening to everyone talk. I was thinking about how important it is to almost have a whole separate discipline, right, like UX for storytellers. Because to your point about the diabetes side, it needs something totally different when you look at the design aspect of it, right? Because it's not wrestling with story problems. And I think that's something, David, that we spend a lot of time on at the lab, is really thinking through the experience and the interface design when you're looking into how you're engaging people in your narrative, because it's totally different. You can certainly build on some of the principles that exist already in design, but they're not the same. So it becomes a challenge in that sense. And that's, I think, something, and hopefully people will start incorporating more and more into their story teams, honestly, is thinking about UX.
Another question?
Not a question, but a comment. I mean, I think that if storytellers don't learn how to code, then their stories will be totally irrelevant. I just really like to say that
Well, we can have a whole debate about that,
Yeah.
but we won't.
I think you just
we
lit
won't.
this place up, man.
We won't, because that's a controversial statement. So, Suzanne, is that it, or do we have one more? One more. Really? Anybody have a brilliant one? No? Nobody wants to be on have that pressure on them. Well, I think there's a lot of food for thought. That last comment, certainly, and I think that it really is.
There's a question back there.
Oh, there is. There's.
I'm a writer. That may be a result of genetic damage or something else. I don't know. The old rule was first get a life, then learn to write about it, which is where the craft is. It takes about 7 years to train a writer. About the same as it takes to train a surgeon. Writers have adapted to every technology that has ever come along, from sawing planks to doing proscenium theater to what you guys are talking about now. Question is, how do we start bridging the gaps between people who have really gone through the pain of learning what it is like to write effectively, write for an audience, write from yourself so you can be truthful, and then get together with the people who are playing all the wonderful new stuff. I mean, I started in prose, got into film, which involved learning photography. I just want to keep going. How do we start bridging the gaps and take the people who can tell stories, whatever the origins of that are, and get them towards the people who are trying to expand the narrative in all the ways we can?
So Juan wants to take that question.
No, I mean, just a small comment. I mean, I think coming from journalism, right, and I think journalism more and more and more is becoming, a short, very short. And, one of the things that we have done for this series is actually to return to feature writing, where there are real stories and not just, repetitions of press releases, right? And we have done that on purpose because we do believe that there is a real key role for storytelling in journalism. And I think that I don't think that anybody here would disagree that labor and that job is still extremely important. The only thing is that it's just one element of a lot of other pieces. That's what I
did. If anyone wants to have the last word, otherwise we're going to give it to you. I love
that's
that.
it.
I think that's a great one. Thank you very, very, very much.